First presenter is going to be James Alvis. He is a Director of Public Affairs at the Korean Economic Institute, having joined the Institute in August of 2002. He's responsible for managing the outreach programs to educate Americans on developments in Korea and U.S.-Korea relations, both inside and outside of Washington, D.C. He's also responsible for presenting and reporting on developments in U.S.-Korea business and economic relations, i.e. through the KEI's monthly newsletter, Insight. He also organizes the KEI's Opinion Leaders Seminars and Ambassadors Dialogue programs, serves as director of the Korea Club, manages the KEI website and calendar of events. Prior to joining KEI, he was a program coordinator for Central and Eastern Europe at the U.S. Energy Association in Washington, D.C., where his responsibilities included coordinating programs for Central and Eastern Europe and communicating with U.S., European, and USAID partners. At USEA, he traveled to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and Bulgaria. Alvis was was a human intelligence collector in the U.S. Army. He was not born as one of those. He was trained to be one of those. From 1989 to 1992, serving in Germany and in Operation Desert Storm. And he was also an infantryman in the U.S. Virginia National Guard from 1987 to 89. He received a certificate in Czech language and culture from the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, a BA in International Studies, and an MBA from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. Alvis's wife, Lisa, is a sales specialist with a biotech company, Applied Biosystems, and they reside in Ashburn, Virginia with their daughter. His hobbies include cycling, so he's going to have a lot to talk with Mark, kayaking, skiing, and reading.
I'd like to thank Professor Phillips for the very kind introduction there, and I'd also like to thank Professors Ringer and Peterson and Corey for putting together this program for us with the Kennedy Center. You know what? I might need a remote control. Okay. Just to provide a bit of an overview of what I'll be discussing here today, I'll be going over a very brief economic background of Korea. I think that most of you are probably familiar with with Korea's economic miracle from the 60s through the 80s and the subsequent economic crisis in the 90s. I'll also be discussing trading with Korea, the Koros FTA, and then in the final section I'll be discussing President Lee Myung-bak's economic pledges. I'll be looking at his goals, the implementation process, and the challenges that he faces in doing so. A bit about Korea Economic Institute. We're a small nonprofit educational organization based in Washington, D.C. We are funded primarily by a Korean government public policy research institute, which is located in Seoul. We were founded in 1982 and recently celebrated our 25th anniversary. Although KEI focuses its efforts primarily in the economic area, our scope of activity embraces all aspects of the U.S.-Korea relationship, including political security issues. That's an area which Mr. Flake worked in quite a bit during his tenure at KEI. And we have a mission to educate Americans on the developments in Korea and U.S.-Korea relations through outreach programs. As I mentioned, I'll be glossing over the transformation and economic crisis because I'm sure that most of you have spent time there, are already familiar with those areas. I'll also be discussing the subsequent recovery and recent developments. I believe that you all are familiar with this story here with Korea emerging from an agrarian economy following the Korean War, and then through the 1960s, through export-oriented industrialization and an educated population that transformed into a modern industrialized country in about 3.5 decades. The GDP has gone from about $2 billion US dollars in 1961 to $950 billion in 2007, at which point it was ranked as the world's 13th largest economy by the IMF. The financial crisis. In 1997, lack of transparency and sound financial markets and lending policies led to excesses in business investments, especially among the conglomerates. Korea followed several other countries into the Asian financial crisis. The government turned subsequently to the IMF to request standby funds. In signing up for the financial aid package on December 3rd of 97, the Korean government agreed with the IMF that it would pursue macroeconomic stabilization and structural reform in the financial sector, the corporate sector, and the labor market. The Korean economy pulled itself out of the crisis in 99 and began to regain stability. Kim Dae-jung's administration endorsed widespread economic reforms and began the implementation process, while President Roh Moo-hyun's administration continued the effort. As I'll be discussing later, and as Dr. Kim will likely be discussing as well, President Lee Myung-bak has spoken out in favor of relaxing regulations, citing efforts such as deregulation and market-friendly reforms as tools for creating jobs and attracting foreign investment. Just a quick look at some recent developments. In 2005, the GDP growth rate sank to 3.9%, but the economy continued expansion into industries such as autos, computer technology, steel, and shipbuilding. The economy expanded 5% in 2006 to $887 billion, with inflation contained at about 2%. By the end of 2007, Korea was the world's 13th largest economy, according to the IMF, with the economy having grown about 4.9%. As I'll be discussing later, the Lee Myung-bak administration has announced a goal of achieving 7% annual growth rate over the next 10 years. Now, they've subsequently revised that number down to about 6%, and most economists still feel that this is too ambitious for a developed economy such as Korea's, and they're forecasting about 5% for 2008. The IMF is estimating about 4.6% growth rate for 2008. In discussing economic indicators, I'll be looking at the GDP growth, the per capita gross national income, and unemployment rate. GDP growth year over year for 2007 was 4.9%, just down from the previous year. Per capita gross national income was $20,000 in 2007, which was up from $18,000 in 2006. The unemployment rate in February was 3%. It's remained fairly constant over the past 4 years, down from a peak of 9% following the financial crisis in '99. The next section, I'll be taking a look at trading with Korea, including the major industries, the trade balance, foreign direct investment, and the Chorus FTA. Major industries include electronics and telecommunications, chemicals, shipbuilding, and steel. Some recent developments in the telecom industry. In 2007, Samsung Electronics handset division overtook Motorola, making it the world's second largest mobile phone manufacturer. At the end of 2007, Samsung Electronics exceeded the 100 billion mark in annual sales for the first time in its history. This achievement places the company, along with Siemens of Germany and HP of the U.S., among the world's top 3 companies in the electronics industry. Looking at autos, from the time when Korea started with a simple assembly process following the Korean War, they began the process in the 60s, they've grown to be the world's 5th largest manufacturer today. Hyundai Motor Manufacturing Alabama is located in Montgomery and currently employs more than 3,300 U.S. workers. In 2007, the plant was operating near capacity, producing about 1,200 cars daily. Hyundai and Kia also recently began manufacturing operations in Central Europe, with operations in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Looking at the shipbuilding industry, Korea is currently the world's top shipbuilding nation, followed closely by China. It's home to the world's three biggest shipbuilders, including Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries, and Daewoo Shipbuilding. Quickly looking at the trade balance, Korea had a 14.64 billion trade balance in 2007. This is down from 16.6 billion in 2006. The decrease is being attributed largely to rising oil prices. Overall imports and exports have increased over the past 6 years, as you can see here on the graph. On April 4th, 2008, the exchange rate was 977 won per dollar, which is compared to 917 won per dollar just 6 months ago. The won's recent weakness has enhanced the competitiveness of Korean exports, but it had strengthened considerably over the past 6 years. Foreign direct investment in Korea was $10.6 billion in 2007, down about $500 million from 2006. And looking at U.S.-Korea trade, the U.S. and Korea enjoy a complementary and sometimes competitive trade relationship. Two-way trade in 2007 was $82 billion, which was a 5% increase over 2006. Korea ranks as the United States' seventh top trading partner, and the U.S. has been replaced by China a couple of years ago as being the second partner now. Major U.S. exports to Korea include semiconductor chips, manufacturing equipment, aircraft, corn, wheat, and plastics. Major Korean exports to the U.S. include cell phones, semiconductor circuits, TVs, monitors, cars, computer components, and construction vehicles. I'll be looking at the FTA. Beginning in 2004, the South Korean Foreign Ministry floated the concept of a U.S.-Korea free trade agreement. The negotiations were announced in February of 2006 and concluded in April of 2007. The agreement would be the second largest trade agreement ever for the United States after NAFTA and the largest FTA ever in Asia. The negotiations were facilitated by the existence of the Trade Promotion Authority, also known as Fast Track Negotiating Authority. I think that Gordon might be talking a bit about this a little bit later on and the importance to the alliance. The U.S. is Korea's greatest investor, having already invested $30 billion in the country's economy. An FTA will open new doors to Korea's trading and economic relations and allow new opportunities to U.S. businesses within the country. Some expected benefits from a successfully concluded FTA would include GDP for the U.S. would likely increase by 10.1 to $12 billion. U.S. exports to Korea would likely increase an estimated 9.7 to 11 billion, and U.S. consumers would benefit by 1.8 to $2.1 billion. Okay, in this next section, I'll be looking at President Lee Myung-bak's economic pledges. First of all, I will examine the goals of his pledges, the implementation process, and then the challenges that he faces. Dr. Kim is going to be talking a bit about the background of President Lee and about his business background, having served as the chairman of Hyundai Group before becoming mayor of Seoul. He was elected in December on a platform of implementing a wide range of economic reforms to reinvigorate South Korea's economy, spur growth, and improve competitiveness. The cornerstone of his campaign pledge has been the Plan 747, which is a 10-year plan by which he intends to achieve 7% annual growth, double the per capita income to $40,000 annually, and to make South Korea the world's 7th largest economy. It's currently the world's 13th largest. He hopes to create 3 million new jobs, which would equate to 600,000 new jobs per year over the next 5 years. He also has an ambitious plan to build a canal running down the length of the peninsula, right here. It's known as the Grand Canal. He plans to assist 50,000 innovative small and medium-sized enterprises, increase foreign direct investment to $12 billion in 2008. FDI peaked at about just under $13 billion in 2004 and has fallen subsequent. He plans to reduce the high prices of new apartments by 10%, combat illegal strikes, and he's also developed a policy to deal with North Korea to provide some incentive for them to dismantle their nuclear weapons program. Specifically, he hopes to boost North Korean per capita income to $3,000 annually over the next 10 years, establish 5 free trade zones, establish 100 manufacturing companies with annual exports of over 3 million, educate and train about 300,000 North Korean workers, create a $40 billion international fund to develop the North Korean economy, and provide humanitarian assistance, but request that North Korea return POWs and abductees. And looking at the implementation process, President Lee's strategy for achieving his economic goals is by promoting business-friendly policies which favor deregulation, transparency, tax reform, and greater openness to investment. He has pledged to reduce corporate regulations to induce business investment. President Lee has said that the government will lift the law that prohibits large chaebol units from making equity investments in an affiliated firm to help increase corporate investment and create jobs for higher growth. The government will relax rules on conglomerates' ownership of banks to strengthen the competitiveness of the financial sector. Under the current law, non-financial companies are prohibited from owning more than 4% stake in any bank. By reducing discriminatory practices, he seeks to stimulate increased foreign direct investment. President Lee cites corporate tax cuts as key to assisting businesses in their expansion and creation of jobs. He refers to corporations as being the primary source of national wealth in Korea and the primary job creator. He has pledged to cut corporate taxes by 5%. He aims, as I mentioned earlier, he aims to reduce apartment prices by 10%. By raising the ceiling on how densely developers can build apartments, the Ministry of Land, Transport, and Maritime Affairs has announced plans to supply 500,000 homes each year, of which 50,000 would be dedicated to newlywed couples. The ministry also plans to expand urban areas from 6.2% of the country to 9.2% by 2020. I mentioned also about the plans for the Grand Canal. This would link Seoul with the port city of Busan, reducing transportation costs, upgrading domestic demand, and creating a new tourist destination. Many residents and visitors in Seoul are already familiar with Lee's project as then mayor of Seoul, where he restored 4 miles of stream previously hidden under a concrete layer for 40 years, reviving the ecosystem and enlivening the city center with a long pedestrian park centered on the stream. You're going to have some pictures of that in your presentation, right? Privatization is another key aspect of President Lee's economic plan, and we'll begin with the privatization of the Korea Development Bank. The newly appointed Minister of Strategy and Finance has indicated that interest rate cuts may be pursued as a method of achieving the revised economic growth rate of 6%. He has also implied that the government will overlook the weak Korean won in order to boost exports. He acknowledges that inflation may drive down domestic consumption, but the strategy would achieve growth goals through export-driven demand. President Lee instructed officials from the Ministry of Justice to crack down on unauthorized strikes and protests, asserting that eliminating illegal strikes and abiding by the law is necessary for enhancing the economy. The ministry is considering submitting a bill to the National Assembly which would apply zero tolerance against illegal strikes, with violators subject to both criminal and civil punishment. To attract foreign direct investment, assistance will be provided for buying land for business, financing, favorable taxation, and amenities like schools, medical care, and housing. And looking at some of the challenges that he faces in achieving these goals, President Lee has begun downplaying some of the targets identified in the 747 plan. I've shown here a 747 jetliner stuck in the mud here, sort of demonstrate the point. The goals of the 747 plan have been criticized by several economists as being unrealistic for a developed economy such as Korea's. President Lee has downplayed the original goal of achieving 7% national economic growth during his first year, citing dismal economic conditions, soaring oil prices, and the government's predetermined budget as being factors. Even with the revised goal of 6% by the administration, the finance minister has determined that deteriorating economic conditions may keep growth below 5% for 2008. The governor of the Bank of Korea has also expressed concern about Korea's economy in 2008, asserting that rapid growth of China and India's economy would lead to increasing demand for oil, grains, and other raw materials, which could drive up commodity prices, fueling inflation and affecting the consumer spending in Korea. In the face of growing criticism, President Lee Myung-bak has shown signs of backing off of his stance of developing the canal. President's spokesperson said that the president holds the position that he will push the canal forward after reviewing public opinion, which, according to a survey conducted by Ayo University, 57% of respondents oppose construction of it. And 2/3 of respondents think that construction of such a canal would lead to pollution of Korea's rivers and streams. As previously mentioned, Korea is ranked by the IMF as being the world's 13th largest economy. In today's terms, Korea would need to move up 6 notches to take the number 7 spot from Italy there. According to IMF data, Italy's $2 trillion economy is currently about twice the size of Korea's. In current terms, and all else being the same, is if each of these countries were to continue growing over the next 10 years by the growth rate, which is given here, estimated 2008 by the IMF, if they were to continue growing at the same rates, then at a rate of 4.6%, Korea would be in the 13th position after 10 years. Let's see, right there. If Korea were to grow at President Lee's goal of 7% a year, then after 5 years, they would be at 13. After 10 years, they would be the 12th largest economy. In order for them to get to the rank of number 7 within 5 years, the economy would need to grow an astounding 19%. And in the longer term, if they were to shoot for making number 7 in 10 years, they would need to grow at 11%. Now, as I explained, these figures are merely illustrative, and it's not possible to predict the long-term growth rates for all these countries. You know, for example, the more developed countries, the Northern American countries, Western Europe and Japan, their growth rates may be going down, while the emerging economies like China and or is India? India is really going to be taking off as well. So the order here is really going to be changing. I'm just trying to provide an example of the challenges that Korea would be facing in order to push up to the number 7 spot in either 5 or 10 years. I'm going to go ahead and skip over the FTA and the challenges that he faces in getting that through. There are a lot of challenges in trying to get the FTA through the U.S. Congress. And both Democratic candidates have spoken out against the FTA. In his bid to promote a more business-friendly policy, President Lee must be careful not to be construed as being overly conciliatory towards the Chaebol, which have been, which were implemented in the over-leveraged debt which led to the 1997 financial crisis. Economic disparity worsened under the previous administration despite a pledge by President Roh Moo-hyun to impose greater economic equality. South Koreans could grow critical of the administration if no progress is made in reducing economic polarization. In the face of this criticism, his administration has plans to use national pension funds to help rescue 300,000 credit delinquents and to extend more credit to small enterprises. The package of measures is named New Start 2008 and is aimed at putting people back on their feet. I thank you for your time, and I believe there will be a Q&A session after Dr. Kim's presentation.
I'd like to thank James and Abraham for those presentations. Now's the sort of question and answer part of the panel discussion, or whatever we want to call it. And since I'm the moderator and I'm in charge, I've taken it upon myself to ask the first questions, because obviously to me those are the most interesting ones, are the ones that I think up. So let me ask both of our panelists here just a question, and dwell on this as long as you want to sort of adequately answer the question. It's kind of an open-ended question, but what do you both see as sort of the biggest economic challenges that face Korea? And that's really open-ended. So, I mean, you could think of this in terms of in the short run, the medium run, the long run. What are the challenges that are most likely the country as a whole is going to have to face? And then obviously, how would you suspect they would have to deal with these? What would the policies be that would deal with them? Let me give you a couple of things that I thought of. Maybe these are not challenges at all. One thing occurs to me is that there needs to be some sort of movement, as Abraham was suggesting towards the end here, on agreements between Korea and China. How does Korea want to align economically with the Chinese? Right. Is that a major issue that Korea needs to worry about, or something they don't need to worry about? What about the possibility of reunification between North and South Korea? What does that do? Or is that just a pie-in-the-sky thing that we don't even really need to worry about? You mentioned energy security. Is that a major issue? What about things having to do with the domestic economy, like education? You mentioned education reform. What about issues dealing with an aging population? I know this is a big issue in Japan. Was reading in the paper the other day about some sort of a policy initiative that Tokyo has to have some 5 to 10% of the workforce be robots by 25 years from now. So is that would make my life easier, I suppose. Or labor shortages, right? Is the aging population going to create labor shortages? So let me sort of throw those out. Go ahead and discuss. You got the microphones there. Who wants to field the first answer? You want to go, James?
There were several questions involved there. In looking at what some of the biggest economic challenges are, I believe that, I'm sure that Abe can address this one further, but energy security is certainly a huge issue. And then also trying to meet the growth goals that President Lee Myung-bak has given. As I demonstrated in my presentation, in order for them to continue growing and to reach the goals that they've established, it's going to be quite a challenge for a developed country to continue growing at those rates. You were talking about some of the challenges and the costs that would be associated with reunification. Well, if you look at the model Germany had in the 1990s, subsequent to their reunification. It's taken them many years to manage the reunification and to absorb the costs associated with that. And their countries were a lot closer economically than what they are with North and South Korea. I think the North Korean economy is less than 1/10 or 1/20th the size of South Korea's economy. The population, I think, is less than 1/2. It'd be more like if Germany had been reunified with Albania or something, a country that's a lot smaller and a lot more economically backwards. President, as far as that being a possibility, it certainly is a possibility. That could happen within the foreseeable future. There is a ministry, as many of you may know, of unification, which looks at these issues. President Lee was looking to disband the Ministry of Unification, but I believe it's still operating. Did you want to address some of the other issues?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned some good issues. I see, just jotting down a couple of things, short run and long run. I think short run issues, I mean, some of the things that they have to address and they haven't really talked about is the labor market. One of the biggest complaints about foreign investments in South Korea is the labor market. And they have one of the strictest labor, essentially you can't freely hire and you can't freely fire people. And so it's created a real problem for international investors and domestic investors for that matter, and increasing labor costs and things like that. And it'll be kind of interesting to watch what Myung-bak addressing these labor market issues. Another short term is this, I had mentioned about deregulation. There's this balance between Myung-bak, in some ways this year is going to be a tough year for South Korea in terms of economic development, and it's slowing down. And one of the main drivers to keep it boosted up is capital investment, getting business to invest, because a lot of the big businesses are sitting on a lot of cash right now. And Myung-bak had promised deregulation, but the question is how do you deregulate and loosen up while ensuring that these businesses will behave in that kind of environment? But you still have to persuade them enough to get them to invest. So there's this kind of real kind of balancing act that Myung-bak has to do. So that's another short-run issue. And the issue of your aging population, Korea has the same problem. People are just not having enough kids. And the social welfare system is going to go bankrupt as well, like in Korea, like in Japan. 2060, I think, is the time frame for Korea that they're going to run out of money in supporting their national pension, for example. So those are, and not running and not having enough people to fill the labor force in the future. So that's some of those short run and long run issues I see.
Let me ask another question. I mean, we've talked a little bit about this 747 thing, 7% growth, become the 7th largest economy in the world. As an economist, this kind of strikes me as really, really ambitious. And I guess one of the questions I have is, where the heck does the administration think the growth is going to come from? Right? I mean, is there anything actually laid out in these policy proposals that says we're going to get 7% growth and this is how we're going to do it?
I believe that President Lee is hoping to fuel growth through the deregulation and the business-friendly policies by trying to promote more exports and fuel the chaebol to continue this growth.
So it's going to be like productivity gains? Is this?
Right.
Increases in productivity. I mean, because growth's either got to come from either increases in productivity, or it's got to come from you got a bigger capital stock, you got more workers, you got some factors of production that you've got more of as a result of this. So.
Well, I think part of it was an animal of the presidential election. It was an election year.
Right,
And everyone was saying 6%. And Myung-bak in some ways wanted to outdo everyone, and he said 7%. So, and a lot of economists came out during the election saying, this is ridiculous. You can never, drive the economy that fast. And then he didn't anticipate the global credit crunch, as well as the wild inflation and the high oil prices that went beyond $100. And now they're backtracking not only 6%, but they're saying around 6%, which means probably below 6%. And so, but I mean, he's depending a lot on the chaebols to fuel a lot of this growth by investing a lot of their cash into capital investment, as well as drawing in foreign direct investment. And they said it's a goal, and Koreans tend to think big, and if they don't reach it, then they they say, well, we tried, but Lee Myung-bak has always been known for big thinking, and a lot of people have told him he can't do it, and he built the Cheonggyecheon thing, and now he's going to try to build a canal thing through Korea, and
You could build one to Kazakhstan too.
yeah, to Kazakhstan too. So a lot of it, I think, is maybe politically driven in some ways.
You're just talking about the canal and some of the criticisms. An interesting article that I've read. North Korea has actually come out and criticized Lee Myung-bak's idea of the Grand Canal. They pointed out, why do you need a Grand Canal when you have ocean on 3 sides of the peninsula?
Sure.
When you have well-developed rail infrastructure and highways.
And you're building it through mountains, right?
Right. So I just thought it was interesting that the North Koreans felt like they had to weigh in on it as well, since everybody else had.
All right, are there any questions from the floor? Oh, come on, yes.
A question with regards, you're talking about how the economy will be affected by unification.
Mhm.
How do you think that would affect policy decisions towards unification, whether they want to delay it or kind of put it off until they feel they're strong enough and ready to integrate with the North Korean economy?
Oh, boy. Gordon, you want to take this one? There are a lot of concerns about if what were to happen if there were to be a regime collapse tomorrow in North Korea. There are concerns not only from South Korea but from China as well about the humanitarian crisis. I mean, China is concerned now with the number of refugees which come across into China. It's an ongoing concern of theirs, and if there were to be a regime collapse, they're concerned about hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people coming across the borders and dealing with that. South Korea has been working on these issues with the Ministry of Unification, and without a doubt, it would take years to bring up the economy of the North to that of the South, and to deal with the humanitarian issues as well. The infrastructure up there, they would need to rebuild the roads, the energy infrastructure, the transmission and distribution is very weak. The system for that is very weak, and in addition to the generation capacity that they have, the entire economy just had to be overhauled. It would take many years and a lot of patience in order to accomplish that.
My view is a little bit controversial because I don't think reunification will come by choice. I think reunification will come by as a crisis management situation. My personal view is very few people are going to be negotiating a long-term deal for reunification. Reunification happens because no one expected it to happen. And that's what happened in the German case. And it happened in the Yemen case, too. Very few people know that Yemen unified, but Yemen unified it. And in some ways, I think reunification is going to come because it's the best worst-case scenario that the people have. And like Jim had mentioned, there's refugee issues and chaos and things like that. slowly developing. Right now, it's not the case, but I really think these things are negotiated long-term back and forth, and then it just happens gradually. I think it'll happen quick and in a big catastrophic way, and a lot of people are not going to be prepared for it. So,
Any other questions?
How do you take Myung-bak's position toward North Korea? It's on the one hand is described as tougher. The North Koreans are upset about Myung-bak's election because they've responded with firing off a missile and kicking the government people out of the Kaesong joint venture thing. And so they're giving signals that they're not happy with the defeat of the Sunshine Policy and this new Myung-bak policy. I personally don't think he's that tough on North Korea. Mm-hmm. And he has within his policy objectives certain things about training North Koreans and incorporating North Korea into the South Korean economy and doing these joint venture things more, building on the role model of the Kaesong venture. And he seems more pragmatic than doctrinaire about this thing. I mean, if we had an ideologue up there that was just anti-communist no matter what, I think we wouldn't see much flexibility. But because he's a pragmatist, first and foremost, I think his anti-North Korean policy isn't really very anti. It's just sort of a slightly tougher line than what we had before. What are your views on that?
I would agree that it's certainly not an anti-North Korean policy. He has not said, we're going to shut down Kaesong tomorrow until you fully denuclearize. He said that they want to expand Kaesong until North Korea fully denuclearizes. And he's made put a lot of great offers out there to help them develop their economy, but they're all conditional. I think that he's using a carrot, but he hasn't threatened any punitive action, at least that I'm aware of, against North Korea. He's just using the carrot and using all these incentives based upon North Korea denuclearizing.
The recent events, it's interesting if when the rhetoric started coming out and they started kicking out the Kaesong, South Korean officials from Kaesong and even Kaesong and now Kumgang as well, a couple of days ago. A lot of this was preceded by some pretty tough stance from the South Koreans too. I mean, there were some kind of significant announcements. One was, Unification Minister coming out and saying, we're not going to expand Kaesong until there's progress on the denuclearization issue. The Korean Joint Chief of Staff came out and said, and he was put into a kind of a tough situation by the National Assembly, but he was essentially made the statement where if a threat was imminent, then the South Korean military would preempt. And then Myung-bak also came out with demands that we need abductees back, we need all these things back, and then there was a response from the North Korean side saying, well, if you're going to preempt us, then we're going to turn you into a sea of fire and ashes or something. And it was a response from the North Koreans. So there was this kind of back and forth thing going on. Yes, and the recent events are frustrations by the North Koreans that of the lack of progress, but the changing atmosphere between North-South relations. But as there's some recent developments that I think my colleagues in the second panel will probably talk about regarding on the North Korea side, U.S.-North Korea and the six-party talk stuff. But I mean, from Lee Myung-bak's perspective, I agree with you. He's pragmatic, and the last thing he wants is to create a disruption because he has to focus on the domestic economy and get the economy going. And so creating this problem in the North certainly doesn't help that situation. And a lot of his policies, in some ways, this whole kind of 3,000 vision, North Korea vision, or I forgot the exact name of it, where he's going to try to increase the per capita in North Korea to $3,000. All of that is based on North Korea opening up as well, which is a poison pill for the North Koreans for all we know. So there's a kind of a thorn in those offers to the North Koreans as well. So.
Okay, well, why don't we take a 10-minute break for the next panel? Everybody can go back and get a choco pie. Let's give a round of applause to our two presenters.